Hello, everyone. Welcome to Jamaica 411. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm your host, Michelle Stern. So, we're going to be discussing NaRRA. And the title of today's video, NaRRA False Alarm. What do I mean? I mean that NaRRA and what is being told about NaRRA by various persons, both in the civil society and in the parliament, is a total misunderstanding of NaRRA itself. Now, when I read the act, I have to admit that maybe there are little brushing up that is required because it seems to me, when I read parts of it, that it does not appear to me to be using legal language. It just seems to be ordinary language. It seems to me that the drafting instruction that was given to the draftsmen, the legal draftsmen at the Ministry of Justice. Now, these draftsmen are legal minded people, they're not business people. So they may not have understood some of what they were being told to do. And what it seems to me when I read the language is as if they took the drafting instruction as is and just take it and put it in the law. And so I think that the Senate, which is now debating the law, needs to, look at the way it is framed and then try and use the intent and rephrase it into legalese language. And I'm going to show you one or two areas where I think that was. Now, in terms of the act and what it is trying to accomplish, you heard it said by Malahoo Fort, by members of the opposition, that the act will not achieve what it is intended to do. I totally disagree, and you're going to see why. You see, what is happening is you have a situation where you can either think one of two ways. You either think inside of the box or you think outside of the box. And this piece of proposed legislation, the bill, is actually a thinking outside of the box, a mechanism that is being attempted to get things done, but not in the slowpoke way that it has been so far. And I am going to show you some brilliant piece of, thinking. And I suspect that this thinking that the Prime Minister, I suspect, devised may well have come about as a result of his experience with the Integrity Commission. I am putting myself out on the limb, and the Prime Minister, of course, will know whether I'm right or wrong, right? So I am going to get into that. But let me ask everyone, please, at this point, can you give the video a thumbs up from now on, please? Please give the video a thumbs up. Please share the video. And if you have not yet done so, please subscribe. And as you subscribe, please remember to hit that notification bell, turn it to all so that YouTube will inform you whenever it is that I have uploaded a video. And remember to leave your comments in the comment section. And I thank you all for doing so. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's get on with business. So, NaRRA. So the NaRRA bill has 34 clauses. When it is passed, the clauses will become sections and they will be renumbered. So it's 34 clauses and 20 pages. And it begins by saying, and this is the title, the long title of the bill, an act to make provision for the management and implementation of the post-disaster reconstruction and resilience efforts consequent on the passage of Hurricane Melissa and for resilience generally to establish the National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority and for connected matters. The first thing we need to know is that this bill has passed in the lower house, meaning that it was debated, amended, and passed by the parliamentarians, the MPs in the lower house, and it's now on its way to the Senate to go through the same process of debates, amendment if necessary. And if there is to be an amendment, because the bill originated in the lower house, it has to go back to the lower house for the minister that is piloting the bill, Prime Minister, to either accept the recommendations of the Senate or reject them, in which case it goes back to the Senate and it is passed. And then now it goes to the Governor General for his signature. They call it the royal assent, and off it goes to the printing office to be gazetted, and then it becomes law and operational. And it's the minister that will determine when it actually commences. Right? Great. Now, let me say this. Why are we at this juncture? After how many years have we been in this country? From 1945, we've been having general elections. And in 1962, we got independence. And during all of that time, everyone is well aware that we are sitting in a tropical cyclone, I suppose I call it, a hurricane zone and an earthquake zone. And either disaster can strike at any time. The one that is most frequent and most likely and perhaps most devastating is actually the hurricane. Because even when earthquakes strike, the big ones, they tend not to affect the entire island, They usually strike in a particular spot and just mash up everything there. So a hurricane can strike and mash up the whole island. That is true. But at least you can prevent or mitigate some of the damages by making sure that your roof's strong and build strong structures and so on. But there are infrastructure that's going to take a hit. What we need in Jamaica is a permanent law that deals with reconstruction whenever there is a disaster. And so I am proposing that NaRRA should be the framework going forward that will deal with reconstruction whenever it is that we have a disaster in Jamaica. So it means that an amendment will have to be done. An amendment to Clause 1 and Clause 34, which speaks to the duration of the act. For the act to continue, we have to either delete that clause 34, which says, duration of the act, this act shall continue in force until the day after the day of dissolution. So what it is saying basically is, once a reconstruction is done, you are going to dissolve the authority and the act will come to an end. What I'm proposing is that they, yes, dissolve the authority if there's no further reason to have it going, but keep the act going. So next time in future there's another hurricane, all the Prime Minister has to do is to announce that there is a disaster, where the disaster is, depending on the scale, and if it is called for, reconstitute the authority. And just like that, hire CEO, NaRRA is back in business without a future government having to come back to Parliament to debate another act. It was done already with PJ. It is done now. Let us make this act the permanent law. And I suggest that maybe all I need to do is to delete Section 34, and that will make the law permanent. And if the law is going to be permanent, dealing with future disasters, they may need to amend the long title. That's my suggestion, and it's in the Senate. And I don't think the Prime Minister should have any problem in accepting it, in my view. At Clause 3, it establishes the authority. And it says, for the purposes of this act, there is established a body to be known as the National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority, which shall be a body corporate to which Section 28(1)(a), B, C, and 2(a) of the Interpretation Act shall apply. So it is set up not as an executive agency, not as a statutory body, but as a corporate body, which means it's the provisions of the Companies Act that is going to govern the NaRRA. It's going to have an Articles and Memorandum of Association and so on. So now we're looking now at the functions of the authority, and that's in the margin on the right, and it's at Clause 4. It says, subject to the provisions of this act, the authority shall be responsible for the administration of this act. That's the first thing. And what does that include? The preparation, implementation, and oversight of national reconstruction and resilience projects, plans, programs, activities, and works, and without prejudice to the generality of the foregoing, there are other things that they are supposed to do as well. As part of their function is to consolidate and prioritize projects, right? Consolidate means bring the projects together and they're going to prioritize them. I suppose that means that they're going to determine which project should go first. So if, for argument's sake, and I'm just saying this as an example, if there's going to be a road surface in an area and the water commission need to put in pipes, clearly you're not going to find a situation like what happened with Whole Hope Road, when the works agency put on with nice carpet road, and when them done, water commission can dig it up back up, lay pipe. We should not see that happening. If NaRRA is going to be in charge, they are going to say the road will only resurface after water commission do them job first. That is my understanding of the practical way in which the NaRRA could ensure that projects are prioritized. I'm sure prioritizing the projects have other meanings too, but I just saw that as a way in which I'm sure it's going to work. Now, the authority is required to establish performance indicators and reporting standards for projects, plans, and programs. So the performance indicator would be relating to the projects, the plans, and the programs. And that's what they're supposed to do. The next one is to procure goods, works, and services for the implementation of projects, programs, and plans. Then another function is to establish project tracking systems to enable the proper monitoring and reporting on all activities. Again, that should be covered by a project management information system, right? A software that they would have to acquire. Next, issue directives and operational guidelines. We'll find out to whom that they are supposed to be issuing these directives to and operational guidelines. Next, it says cause projects, programs, and plans to include standard specifications and requirements for the achievement of climate and disaster resilience by works to eliminate or mitigate the adverse effects of catastrophic climate and geophysical events. So, a whole heap of words. What do they mean? They mean that it is NaRRA's responsibility to ensure that whatever works are done. The entity that is doing the work is supposed to provide NaRRA with standards and specifications that will ensure that when them done build that road, the bridge, the retaining wall, it hurricane proof and it earthquake proof. And where it's not possible for them to construct and make these construction hurricane and earthquake proof, the specifications should at least mitigate the adverse effects of catastrophic climate and geographic events. They should lessen it. You follow? That is a high standard that is being set here. And it is the responsibility of NaRRA to ensure that them study that specification and it is workable. So, for example, the person or a company may come and say, okay, we're going to build this road and we're going to build this road for this price and these are the specs and what we anticipate will happen if there is a category 5 hurricane. And of course, yes, in such and such a place in China, this is the kind of road that they build and it hold up there. You follow what I'm saying? And then they can check it out and find out say it's true. And then they would give them the contract to build the road. And this is the reason why NaRRA was created with these special powers to ensure that they're not just there to see to the construction, but the construction would have to be done in such a way to ensure that the next shower rain don't come and wash away the road, or the road will end up and last for less than 30 years. And it will go take a while to pay it back. So the road has to be done properly, and they are there to make sure that the National Works Agency don't muck it up like how you see them muck up the rest of the roads. It says at G, establishing project management, compliance, monitoring, reporting, and risk management systems necessary for timely, efficient, and effective performance of procurement contracts for the implementation of approved projects, programs, and plans. The first are going to have to prepare reports to this effect, then implement the management systems. They would have to have a software for that. I suppose a project management system may cover that. Maybe there's another one for it. But it talks about compliance. It's going to ensure that they comply with the procurement rules. They talk about monitoring, reporting, and the risk management. They're going to have to establish what risks there are. I mean, whatever it is they say you're going to do, there are risks involved, and they're going to have to say what those risks are and manage the risk so that they can get things done on time. Not to mention, it will also ensure the success of the project. And that is my understanding of what that is saying. Next, it says establish and maintain a register of approved projects in accordance with Section 20. So you heard that being discussed in Parliament. So there's going to be a register of approved projects. Now, who is going to approve the projects? The Cabinet. The Cabinet is the one that approves projects. Now, I hear Nikisha Burchell in her video where she ridiculing the mace and talking all kind of foolishness. She talked about the concentration of power, and she spoke about Cabinet is going to be the one to determine projects. I want to know is which rock she was under. Or maybe her head was so buried in books from here. She's very bright. So maybe her head was buried in books. She never had no time to pay attention to what is going on. But every single works that is done by government and carried out by government has to have cabinet approval. Cabinet is the center of central government. And it is from cabinet that you have ministers and ministries. And from ministries, you have departments and corporate bodies. And all of them work together to carry out the policies of the cabinet. And if you're interested and you're not busy chatting or upon your phone, it is the Constitution of Jamaica that gave cabinet that power. It is the Constitution of Jamaica that stated that cabinet shall be the sole authority to make policies for Jamaica. Nobody else. What you get to do as member of parliament elected by people is to ensure that whatever it is that the government is passing into law does not breach their rights. That's all you do. You make proposals and you ask for amendment to improve on whatever it is the government is bringing to pass into law in order to give effect to their policies. So what you're talking about, them making these projects and determining these projects on concentration of power, then who's supposed to make that decision, my dear? Eh? Civil society? Who elect them? Somebody elect them? They have no say in the matter, right? The people elect a government, and the government, according to the Constitution, they are the ones who must make the policies. They bring the laws to give effect to those policies, and all you can do is to propose amendments to improve it. You can't stop it. So the cabinet devised the projects, and then they will hand those projects over to the CEO of NaRRA. And it says here that he is supposed to maintain a register. Next, the duty of the authorities to carry out such other duties as may be necessary for the proper carrying into effect of the provisions of this act. Now, some persons will look at this and say, but this is wide. How is it wide? It limits him by the very wording. It says that he can carry out any other duties, provided that those duties will assist in the carrying into effect of the provisions of this act. So if he's going to do something that will not carry into effect the provisions of his act, he's acting ultra vires, him acting outside of his authority. So the words itself are limiting as to what it is he can do. You follow now? Yes. At subclause 2, it says, subject to the provisions of this act and without prejudice to the generality of the provisions of subsection 1, the authority shall have the power. Now, remember now, they had functions and now they have some powers. And the first one they say is to carry out or secure the laying out and development of areas. This is one instance that I think that the Senate may want to fix it up a little to make it sound, a little more legalistic and clear. Now, what I understand this to mean is that if, for example, they need to move Black River elsewhere, so they're going to create a new Black River, they are the ones who will be responsible for the laying out, meaning that they will hire a land surveyor, architect, all of them, to do a subdivision. So they do the layout, and they also have the power to do the development of the area that they will be calling New Black River. Follow? Yes. At B, it says the authority shall have the power to lay out, construct, and rehabilitate roads and buildings and carry out such other building and engineering operations as may appear to it to be necessary or desirable in, on, over, or make under land within any area. Now, I would suggest to the senators that they put the word such in here. So it would say over or on the land within any such area. because A already said that they can develop and lay out any area. And it is now that area that they determine that they're going to lay out and develop that all of these others fall under. So I would suggest that everywhere it says any area, that it should say any such area. Now, so they're going to lay out, construct, rehabilitate roads. Now we know the National Works Agency, I do believe, has the authority to deal with roads in this country that government is going to be building. But remember what it says, that it is within the area that they have selected that they will be laying out, constructing, and rehabilitating those roads. So it sounds as if they may take the control out of National Works Agency's hand, or if they use the National Works Agency, they are going to be monitoring them, or very possibly where it says before that they're going to issue directives and operational guidelines to make damn sure that the roads that they're building is resilient. So this possibly may be saying that if they use the NARRA, that NARRA would be subordinate to NaRRA. They also have the power to lay out, construct, rehabilitate, restore, and provide car parks, piers, public parks, public gardens, and other public amenities within any area. They can carry on any business or undertaking for the reconstruction and development of any area. They have the power to contribute sums in respect of expenditure incurred in connection with the delivery of any projects, programs, and plans for the development of any area, and engage in any other activity designed to promote the development of any area. Now, you may be wondering why it is that NaRRA is being given all this power. Remember, it is the cabinet that will devise all these projects. All of the projects that NaRRA is going to carry out, it is devised by the cabinet. And including in those projects will be the layout of certain areas, the construction and rehabilitation of buildings, roads, piers, parks, and all them sitting there. So in order for NaRRA to carry them out, each one of those parts of the project, they have to be given the power to do so. Right? That's all that this section is saying, that they have the power to carry out all of the aspects that are included in those projects, programs, and plans. Yes. Now we come to clause 4, subclause 3, or what will soon be known as section 4, subsection 3. And this is what alarmed the parliamentarians and everybody, it seems, the most. It says, for the purpose of performing its functions under this act, the authority may, subject to any regulations made hereunder, do anything and enter into any transaction which, in the opinion of the authority, is necessary to ensure the performance of its functions. Take such action as may be necessary and practicable to ensure the preservation of sites and objects of architectural and historic interest. And it says at 4, the authority shall, if lawful and practicable, that means to say that I know yet, utilize existing capacity, resources, facilities, and systems in government which may be appropriately co-opted for the purposes of this act. So what alarmed them the most is they do anything and enter into any transaction, which in the opinion of the authorities is necessary to ensure the performance of its functions. I don't like that. They think that that was too wide. But remember what it says here, and nobody seemed to have noticed. In the top section, it says that for the purpose of performing its functions. So the functions that were listed before is limiting in itself. And therefore, if the act is saying, if to carry out those functions, there are other things that we don't mention here that they believe is necessary to help them to perform the functions better, to make the NaRRA a success, they can do it. That's all it is saying. It don't mean to say that if the CEO decide that he want a parrot inside of the office, that he can go and buy the parrot, because that don't have nothing to do with the functions that were listed here in the act. You understand? Yes, so there remain be nothing for them to be alarmed about. So let me give you a simple example. There is nothing in the act that says that they are permitted to rent office spaces, and yet office spaces may be needed, not just in Kingston, but maybe elsewhere, in order for them to carry out their functions. And so they are able to do so without having to go back to Parliament to get Parliament to amend the act to allow them to do so. You follow? All they have to do is write to the minister. The minister, which is the Prime Minister, will give them the okay, and then that's that. Clause 5 created the position of Chief Executive Officer and says who the Chief Executive Officer is supposed to report to. It says for the administration of the authority, there shall be a Chief Executive Officer appointed by the Prime Minister by instrument in writing. Now, some persons are wondering why the Prime Minister. Very simple. Whenever there's an entity that is established, there's always somebody with the ultimate responsibility for its failure or its success. The way in which a draftsman drafted NaRRA, there is no board. There's a minister and CEO prominently mentioned in this act. And therefore, it is to the Prime Minister whose head the blame will fall if it fails, and who will get the praise if it succeeds, because that is how he has been positioned. The CEO also is going to have a problem. If the Prime Minister look and say, now carry out the thing as how I'm supposed to, and it will look like to go fail, and I'm going to get blamed, I'm going to get rid of him. Right? So because it's the Prime Minister that has the ultimate responsibility for the success or failure, it is he would have to employ the CEO. You can't make somebody else employ the CEO. And then when the CEO mess up, you're going to say, the Prime Minister is to be blamed. No. He is the one that going to get the blame, so he must employ the man. And him going to make damn sure that him employs somebody that he is of the opinion can carry out NaRRA successfully. You follow? So that's the reason why he would be the one responsible for finding the right person to carry out NaRRA and nobody else. The CEO is to act on behalf of the authority, and it's the CEO who is responsible for the day-to-day management of the authority. At 6, quite a number of persons in the Parliament and elsewhere, they have an issue with the delegation of the functions of the Chief Executive Officer. And it says the authority and the Chief Executive Officer, respectively, may, with the approval of the Minister, by instrument in writing, so it has to go to the Minister for approval, subject to the provisions of this Act, delegate to any person the performance of such of their functions other than the power of delegation as they may from time to time consider to be necessary. Now, do you remember the functions of the authority? It speaks to prioritizing projects, establish performance indicators, procure goods, works, services, establish project tracking systems, and all of that. That's the function of the authority. The authority is just a name on a piece of paper. It can do nothing. Somebody will have to carry out those jobs, and its people will have to carry out the jobs. So when it speaks to the functions of the authority, is somebody going to have to go carry them out? When it comes to procurement, goods, works, and services, you're going to need a procurement officer. So the power to delegate the function of the authority to procure goods, works, and services has to be done by SMADI. And that person would be a procurement officer in a procurement department, or what I call a purchasing department. You follow? Same thing is true of the project tracking system. The authority is just a name on paper. And even if the authority is the CEO is not going to be expected to carry out all of them sitting here. Somebody has to carry out these functions. So he is able to hire somebody to do the job. That is him delegating his function to somebody else. And when it comes to any function that was vested in the authority, the CEO, acting on behalf of the authority, is going to delegate that function to another employee for it to be carried out. So, for example, where the authority has the function to establish project tracking system, as somebody going to have to do that work. That's all that is saying there. So there is nothing at all, nothing whatsoever that is wrong with Section 6 for anybody to be alarmed about. But you see, when you don't know not about business, you only know about communications, or you know about law or doctrine, but you don't know not about business, you will think that there is something alarming about it. That is because you don't know how a business operates. Every job in a body corporate is a delegation of the functions of the CEO. And just in case some of them harder years one in the parliament don't understand, it talks about the power of delegation. They can delegate any one of the functions except the power to delegate, meaning to say that after them delegate to you, you cannot take that power and then delegate it to somebody else. You have to go back to the CEO, and the CEO will make another delegation. That's all that is saying. Now, under 7, the minister has the power to appoint a committee, and that committee will be looking at the exercise of the powers and duties of the authority under the Act and report back to the minister. Now, if that is not oversight, I don't know what is. At 9, it says the authority shall keep proper accounts and other records in relation to its functions and shall prepare annually a statement of accounts in accordance with the generally accepted accounting principles promulgated from time to time. So they're going to also need to appoint an auditor to have their accounts audited every year. And at 4, it says the Auditor General shall be entitled to, at all times, examine the accounts and other records in relation to the authority. 10 was also another contention. Reports, returns. So the authority shall furnish the minister with such reports, returns, accounts, and other information as the minister may require with respect to the activities of the authority, and shall afford the minister with facilities for verifying such information in such manner and at such times as the minister may reasonably require. I expect that will be done by the committee that the minister will be setting up to monitor the activities and the powers exercised by the authority. And I'm talking about the verification of the information that the authority gives to the Prime Minister. So like all other authorities that is set up by the government, they have to produce an annual report at a certain time. They have to give that annual report to the minister, and the minister is the one that takes it to the Parliament and table it. In addition to tabling the annual report, the minister will also table the accounts, the statements of account, and the audited financial statements of the authority as well. 17 speaks to the relationship between Cabinet and NaRRA. It says the Cabinet shall cause to be issued to the authority an official list of approved reconstruction and resilience projects and designated strategic investment projects. And the authority, when they receive that official list of approved projects, it's their job now to develop programs and detailed plans, including project scope, delivery arrangements, and timelines for the implementation of the approved reconstruction and resilience projects appearing on the official list. Subject to subsection 3, they're going to implement those projects, programs, and plans. And it says at 3, programs and plans for approved reconstruction and resilience projects shall not be implemented without the prior approval of Cabinet. So he's going to receive the list of approved projects, but he can't implement until Cabinet give him the go-ahead. Why? That's a very good question, and I suspect it may well have to do with the money itself being available to the authority to carry out each of those projects. And we're talking about a lot of money. So the CEO will not be able to spend that kind of money. He has to get permission from higher ups, and in this case, it will be the Cabinet. And if there was a board, it would have to go to the board and then to Cabinet to spend them the whole heap of money there. See? Yes. Here is where NaRRA is a big winner for me. And I wonder if it was not inspired by the Prime Minister's experience with the Integrity Commission. Look at this. Here it is saying that to expedite the necessary approval processes for the timely completion of an approved reconstruction and resilience project or a designated strategic investment project, the authority may convene relevant approving entities from which an approval or other input is required to coordinate and prioritize their respective activities by establishing timelines for any inspections, evaluations, or assessments required by the relevant approving entity and deadlines for decisions on applications for approvals or other inputs made or submitted by the authority to those approving entities. Contrary to what you were hearing in the Parliament, it does not say that NaRRA is not going to abide by all of the requirements of the law. They need to get approval for building permit. They need to get approval for subdividing land. They need to get NEPA for environmental permits. They need all of that because the law says any construction I do
You have to go through that the process. They need it. But here's the difference. NaRRA has been given the authority, or by this act, to say to these entities, all right, so we need to have the subdivision done. It's going to go to the municipal corporation, about 5 or 6 copies. From there, it go to the planning department, NEPA, it go to the town and country, and then it goes to the fire department. And then the people are going to make the decision. And these things take time. So the act gives NaRRA a special power, and that is to determine the timeline as to when they must inspect and when they must, come back with a decision. But I don't expect that NaRRA will be dictating. What they would do is to sit down with the municipal corporation and ask them, how much time do you need from, submission to approval? And them say, well, this thing usually take a year and a half because of so and so. And then they negotiate until NaRRA said to them, well, I need this thing back in 2 months. And they now must say to NaRRA, well, we can't give you in 2 months. The most we can do, if we set everything aside, is to give you back in 3 months. And NaRRA may say, I tell you what, 6 weeks. So I'm going to be negotiating. And once them say, okay, we will see what we can do. Once them say that, them good, because them are going to do it. NaRRA then submits the drawings to the municipal corporation with an instruction on it that you must come and inspect, because they might have an agreement now. You say you can inspect within a week, come and inspect within a week. You're going to do an evaluation within 2 weeks, 2 weeks after that, next such and such and such. And by the 6th week on a specific day, they're supposed to come to a decision. That is what that is said. And I'm wondering if this was inspired by the Integrity Commission, because when the Integrity Commission writes to the declarant and asks them for information, they give them a time in which to submit. And this to me is going to make a great deal of difference in terms of the timely approvals of these agencies. Big difference. And this to me is one of the most innovative part of this bill. And when you talk about the bill not going to achieve what it set out to achieve, rubbish. This is not saying that the authorities cannot make the decision that they need to make pertaining to the approvals. It simply means they have to do it within a specific timeline that they and the authority of NaRRA will work out. And I'm telling you, this is a splendid piece of innovation. First class. So at this point, I think we've seen enough of what it is that NaRRA is supposed to be. Now, do you recall that in the debate, both Malahoo Fort and other speakers, Mark Golding and all of them, said, who opposed the bill, that the bill as written will not achieve what it's set out to achieve? Not true. I am going to show you that it does just that. And to do so, we need to look at NaRRA in practice. And for that, we're going to have to use our imagination. Once a bill is passed and NaRRA is gazetted, the first thing that is going to happen is that the Prime Minister is going to need to find a CEO. Remember, we are using imagination that NaRRA is now in effect. The CEO going to look and see what function NaRRA is supposed to carry out. And him look and him see that him need to have accounting records. So the first thing we need is an accounting department. Comes with the accounting department, you're going to need a financial controller and an internal auditor and a filing department. So that now is your accounting department. NaRRA says it can hire people, so you're going to need an HR department. NaRRA speaks to the projects and certain kind of reporting. That means you're going to need a software like a projects management software. And for the accounting department, you're going to need an accounting and management system softwares in order to carry out the functions of both quickly and efficiently. Once you start to introduce software, you're talking about computers. And so that means you're going to need an IT department with an IT manager. It speaks to procurement, so you're going to need a purchasing department with a purchasing manager. And of course, for your projects, which will be the main production line, so to speak, you're going to need a projects department with a projects manager and a whole lot of various breakdown of the project area, because you're going to have several projects running at the same time. You're going to have several people overseeing those projects to make sure they are doing what they're supposed to do. And so you're going to have these departments, all of them headed by a manager. Each department is going to have their own meeting. Remember, you're talking about accountability, and you're talking about functionality. And it is the act that is giving its functionality, and it is a CEO that is going to now put all of that in place. It's a corporate body, so now he has a structure to deal with. He has no board of directors, so he is going to report directly to the minister. And the minister is going to have a committee, and chances are it's the minister in that committee that he will be reporting to. Within the operation of NaRRA, the CEO is going to have regular meetings with his manager so he can keep a track of what is going on. He's going to have project managers and field officers going out to these projects to create a report on the progress of each of the projects. And I would expect that there will be contractors, a variety of them, carrying out the works. In addition to all of that, you're going to need stationery. You're going to need equipment. So they're going to also need to have machines to do like Xerox machines, and then we're going to need one of them big old printing machine to print plans. All of those equipment is going to be required and purchased by the procurement department. And since NaRRA is not there forever and ever, they may well be rented or leased. And all of these operations will have to be carried out in office space. So the CEO will have to go and find himself office space after him design the organization flowchart, so to speak. He's going to need to have a layout of the office area, so I'm going to hire somebody to do all of that. We need furniture, computers, filing cabinets, softwares, all of those things. And when that is done and NaRRA is established, that is the functioning body that will be carrying out the project. So what they mean by when they say that the act is not going to achieve what it set out to do, what I just described to you is coming from the very act that was passed by the Parliament and in the Senate now being debated, the very same bill. So what I just described for you is a functional NaRRA that is now waiting for the first project to get to work. So when they claim that the act will not achieve what it set out to achieve, they're talking rubbish. The reason why they were talking rubbish is because they were looking at what is written on the paper. They were not doing what you and I just did. Use our imagination to see whether what is written in the law can be put into practice. And that is what we just proved. That everything in the law gave NaRRA the power to be able to carry out its function effectively and efficiently. All that has happened is that the act has deviated in certain kinds of innovations, such as the business of NaRRA setting timetable for these approving entities to approve and make a decision. And that cannot happen without NaRRA sitting down with them and negotiating the timeline. And this is what I have to tell you today. The act just need a few little fixing up in terms of the wording. It needs to be more legalistic rather than ordinary. Outside of that, the act is an excellent piece of legislation, and it involves innovations that some of them people in the Parliament don't understand, right? And that's all there is to it. So I look forward to seeing the Senate pass this act. Maybe they're going to propose one or two more amendments. And I think what should be amended is when they're closing NaRRA, after NaRRA completes the reconstruction, they're going to be dissolving NaRRA. I think that NaRRA should continue as a permanent law. Dissolve the authority because it's no longer needed, but the law is there that if there's another disaster in future, once a disaster area is declared, especially if it's large scale, all the Prime Minister need to do is to reconstitute the authority, hire a CEO, and then everything that is in this act will be already in place, and then just get to work. What happened because PJ Patterson had set up something similar? That act was not made a permanent law. And you see how long after the hurricane that we're putting this law in place to spend the money we have how much months now? That's the point that I'm making. This would not be necessary in future. The act will be triggered once there is a disaster. and it will save a lot of time, and it will enable the country to recover much faster. So that's what I have for you today. I hope you found my breakdown of NaRRA. I didn't want to go through everything because, you've heard others, and it's a long video as it is. So I want to thank you all for joining me. Let me know in the comment section what you now think about NaRRA. If you have a fairly good idea, if you still think it's a bad law, if you think it's a good law, let me know. Please remember to share this video far and wide, especially to the constituencies affected. There are 16 of them in 5 parishes. And please let them know that the whole of the PNP MPs them voted against this bill, even the one them in a Funo area that is so badly damaged and badly needed the help. Voted against the bill, the whole of them. So please share. Remember also to subscribe and leave your comments in the comment section. Until next time, take very good care of yourselves and walk good.